Hey guys, good morning. Vampire Elage reporting in. We didn't really end the part 4 on a good note yesterday. I did rush and create a part 5 right after I worked around what was happening. But I watched it myself after cutting the video, and it looked like a frustrated, crazy parrot person talking the same thing twice. So I deleted the part 5, and we'll be saying again what happened once we in the game. We discovered a new bug yesterday that never happened to us before in over 4,000 hours of Warhammer 2. The starting of the ambush battle was hanging around, and it's leading into the crush. So that movement on the start of the ambush battle would not start, and the enemy would start casting attacking spells, and the camera would still be moving without us getting control of our units. I also figured out one thing that might be happening on this computer, which is unique to me. Sometimes when a game hangs, instead of trying to recover, like waiting for the program to respond, my PC seems to just close it to the desktop, so it seems like it's crashed the desktop. So it looks like maybe issues connected to Warhammer 2, and some cases like what happened to Dragon Age Origins might be just unique here. Because on the other computer that I did this battle, it just hanged, and it did start after 45 seconds. So I put a stick, transferred the save, went to the other computer using older i5 CPU, 1060 NVIDIA graphic card, same company RAM, same amount. Out of date graphic drivers, out of date Windows 10. And actually, Windows 10 are broken there. It crashes every time it tries to update for some reason. The game was running on higher settings than this game here. It was laggy, but the battle did start. So what happened here? We attacked an army here. There were 5 armies here total. 14 armies garrison, 1 army ambushing. The army ambushed us, and we had to fight. The ambush was hanging on the camera, like army moving, about to get attacked, and it never attacked. It crashed about 3 times. You can see at the end of part 4. So it kind of ended the stream. Didn't want to deal with this frustration, but it looked like one of those situations where you just have to keep going, and one of these battles will actually start. After a lot of frustration, it can happen sometimes, but usually just you stop playing. So I put the save on another PC, loaded the battle. The first one hanged even longer than this PC, but that other PC is slower. And the battle started. The Lord Scroll, that's just everything piled up. The Lord Scroll used the smoke monster, and this spell here, and it crushed and it killed nearly half of the sirens. Their health, they're just getting destroyed because they have no protection against it. I casted the Invocation of Heck. I just clicked twice on it, casted on the sirens on the group, and the game crashed like instantly. So on other PC as well. So the second one did with fine. I sped around. I destroyed the attack army that ambushed us. Slowly destroyed everybody else. There was a lot of them with some tricky units. Use the handguns to kill their magic attackers and just grind down the rest with our nearly unkillable units. The casualties were minimal. This was the battle result. I made a screenshot out of it. 39 casualties. And the post-battle options for replenishment put the army back to full strength. Like, easy battle, easy game, easy life. But that ambush bug I've not seen before. I'm not sure what caused it. It might have caused it the enemy had too many units, and the reinforcement range was bugged.
A welcome tide.
So it's weird. Anyways, it answered the save back here, and I don't think it's related to the computer thing at all, because the other computer is much slower and also has maybe more issues. As I was turning off the PC, the Windows 10 update just froze, and I had to restart the PC, force restart it. So that the PC is even out of date. We are here again, continuing this campaign. Not really much else going on. Just click here. We're splitting the streams together with X3, and putting all my spare time pretty much this day in X3. We're at war with quite a bit of factions, trying to make friends and allies with Dark Elves, who have been dominating. The Reichland is huge, and they're getting even bigger, and they'll be fighting the Dark Elves. We'll see who wins. We did broke our alliance with Cult Pleasure, Clump Pestilence, because they're useless. They lost the settlements to the Chaos, and the Chaos just left them alone, and they were starting to rebuild. No, 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 no. Kill the useless rats and take their lands, and we'll deal with Chaos ourselves. So this is what's been happening right now. That battle that was crashing, we did the workaround. It's quite frustrating, to be honest with you guys. I was very close to just end this campaign here. What happened to the High Elves? They got destroyed by the Dark Elves. We destroyed Teclis, but the rest of them got destroyed by the coalition of Harganet, Cult of Pleasure, and the Nagarond. They were actually just stomping them.
Blood and plunder.
I felt like I clicked that button 3 times already. So we'll be taking the rest of the jungle here from the Clump Pestilence, because they're useless. We did betray them, so our ability was very low. It was a good betrayal, because they were on life support after barely dealing here with the remaining Chaos armies.
Insults.
And we'll just kill them now.
No point.
This is a nice extra battle for Shidwi, is gonna get good ranks. This army is almost unstoppable unless the enemy has numbers with magic attackers.
Send them down. Never.
So we're stuck here to attack the city, huh?
Bad idea.
The Chaos did raise this one, and they might be going for Holotl. We'll see. Let's actually see if we can, if this works now.
Speak. The mother of the Druki will hear your request.
We've been giving gifts to the Dark Elves, so we get trade agreement and alliance, but credibility rating is going to be very low, so we're going to have to wait for it to recover. We expect to be allied with Malekith, because if we didn't give them, they would have attacked us, and fighting Dark Elves so the Empire and Dwarves exist, I don't think so. We don't really care about lands out of Lastria anyways, we're not playing a long campaign here. You can say we're just playing a longer short campaign. This campaign could have ended already, but we don't have much planned this month, so we're better playing a little bit longer.
The sea knows my fate.
I think we're gonna attack this one at the same time. It's out to resolve. It's not happening.
Bray comes. Fight.
Yoo-hoo! It's gonna be the same as the last 2 days, so playing this for about 4 hours, maybe 5. The regular stream's about 7 hours, but I'm just playing this with some of the X3, and pretty much the rest of my spare time I'm putting it into X3. I'll be playing X3 again all night. Hey Bress. Other than this campaign, we have Karazakarak planned this month. Somebody might request something, but I don't think it's gonna be Warhammer 2, but who knows. So we just have this campaign and the Karazakarak planned this month. Unless they release the patch, then we'll play more. We're still waiting for the cold fix. I mean, hot fix. I mean, patch. It's been almost a month now.
They shall fall.
This army has the flying handguns to counter magic attackers, and 9 unkillable rotting Prometheans, gunnery mobs, and the sirens to kill the rest of the army. So the handguns pretty much focus on the enemy magic attackers, and then we just stomp them with the rest.
Fleet captain! I'm on board.
The deck droppers, when they get missile resistance technology, they actually get much tankier in the air. Otherwise, pretty squishy. Should just drop this bombardment here. All of those rattling guns. There's one magic attacker here. The poison wind mortars. This is the Awakened campaign with a house rule of no artillery. We will not be running artillery in this army anyways. This army is a flavor army, it does not need artillery.
Enemies wild.
It's a strong flavor because of the Notorious Admiral. We have several magic attackers there. The Sirens have terror, so the Reds will just flee for the most part. When we have extra powder, the deck droppers, they are pretty devastating. When we have the other boss for them, the damage is no joke. For the nerfs, this was the strongest unit of the Vampire Coast after the Necrophix Colossus. Three of them can destroy a Hell Cannon in one volley.
Blood to spill.
It's funny how yesterday we didn't have a crash with Invocation of Hake, not on this PC, and we discovered a new bug that causes crashes. You can't make this shit up, right guys? You just can't make this shit up. When I see shit like this happening, it's like the game is alive.
Fleet Admiral.
Just push those guys and let them shoot. Sirens are fast, and this guy's good at grinding, but they're still kind of vulnerable to some strong anti-large infantry. That's why we have Invocation Heck help. By the way, Invocation Heck is not the only thing that crashes the game. It's the Curse of Undead as well. We've seen on the video Mumford casting the Rise Dead, triggering the Curse of Undead, which is the mini Invocation Heck, and it crashed the game. If you're wondering about that, if you missed it, check the start of the yesterday video. So casting any spell from Lord of Vampires could crash the game. They're doing pretty good against this assassin. There should definitely be someone in combat. This army was much more powerful before they introduced free experience for the AI. All flavor armies got weaker since that update. So, you know, the game got harder, and I guess, you know, to say less fun, but you can still try harder with these compositions. Just it's, some compositions gonna be hard to beat. Some people, you know, would argue that this is not a flavor army, but just a powerful army. But I disagree. It doesn't have the most powerful unit of this faction, so it's definitely a flavor army. Oh, Gwen stream. There is actually I have some bug with Gwen's Wizard, and I'm waiting for them to fix it. They introduced a bug with a reward tree. Unlock out of the new season. What's the veteran skill for the Sirens? Leadership, speed. Leadership, speed, and one more thing. Leadership and speed is pretty good for them because they do have low leadership. But with everything, you double the leadership eventually. It's not good for the deck droppers, but it's very good for the Sirens. This is another one of those, you know, range units that doesn't get anything from a veteran battle skill for range.
Dance macabre.
Love the amount of damage this unit has taken, look at this. Oh, look at this, it's bugged. That's why it's keep taking damage. Oh, look at this, another bug. This is an old bug. You know, apparently they fixed it, but, you know, it comes back. Oh, man. There's 100 of these little bugs that, you know, apparently got fixed. Developers forget about them and, you know, in their head it's fixed. Sometimes that bug can affect you pretty badly. It can actually kill your units. I'm pretty sure, about like 95% sure, at one point in Warhammer 2 history, they used an old build to patch with the new patch. So the patch that was previously patched on top of this patch. So let's say there was a version A, B, and C. We were playing version B, and they were about to update the game to version C, but they applied the version C on top of version A. And the changes that were improved on version B over version A were gone. I'm pretty sure at one point in history of Warhammer 2 this has happened. There's a lot of the bugs have been introduced. And you can obviously, you know, see it if you play hundreds of hours a month at that period, you know, that something went wrong with the game. So, at one point, some of the fixes that were applied were gone, because they updated the wrong version of the game. You know, you gotta give it to them. You know, so sometimes you know these things happen, because you know, this might just confirm it. Because the game did had a lot of versions here, and you know, you get confused after a while.
Make yourself Admiral of the Fleet.
Okay, we'll be eliminating Clump Pestilence, taking the jungle. You can only have 6 reels, 6 treasures, but if they're far, you just dump them. They're decent rewards, the great hordes. The miserable hordes are a waste of time, so it might worth, you know, checking them out. Usually set a, you know, extra hero to do it. So it's melee defense. Yeah, I forgot. It's 8 melee defense. It's really good for the sirens. This is really bad for deck droppers. You know, speed for deck droppers, okay. Leadership, you know, keep them alive. They get nuked in the air. But this is not a single buff to their damage, reload rates, no damage, no ammunition, nothing. Why are they so afraid, you know, to give proper buff to the range units? So you can see here the veteran skills for the guns, only missile damage, no ammunition, no reload times. Veteran units for the flying guns, nothing. And this is one of the reasons this faction is never going to be meet Dwarves and the Empire in the quality of range. So the artillery only get missile damage, and the guns only get missile damage. No reload times, no ammunition. And these units actually need this buff, especially deck droppers. So they can just, you know, do their thing the whole battle. They do have very strong skill here. Because of the Haunted Horror skill existing, which affects both sirens and deck droppers, this Lord is perfect for this role. One with the impressive Seacraft. This is a strong one for the deck droppers, 20% missile damage. But they already have good missile damage. Extra powder, they can have overkill damage as they have over 80% ammunition. But the fact there is no ammunition buff or other buff, it makes it a little bit weaker battle skills. Makes this faction a little bit weak on the battle skills. They have the worst set of battle skills on most of their units. The worst versions of all factions. Except if you can meet flavor for this skill, which is on the Notorious Admiral. Their artillery skill is even less than usual, but it's still good. And the Rotten Dead is the best skill, but the rest of the skill is just below average. Because of the veteran skills, really. And these are not really good range units like the Empire and Dwarves have. I guess it might be, you know, I don't think they take into account that this faction has magic as well. Undead magic. They're the undead. They might take this into account. I like to think so. They actually, you know, 200 IQ brain. But I think it's just do it on purpose because of extra powder. So you give this faction a special ability like extra powder, and when you design everything around it to be less than any other faction, do they really get extra powder? And an ability that is special to this faction that actually makes their units strong when they have a lot of ammo. Do they really get stronger range? Yes and no. Yes and no. The extra powder, you know, it's illusion, since everything else is weaker than the other range factions. So the moment they you lose 20% ammo, they're much less than the Dwarves and the Empire when it comes to firepower. Of course, you can keep ammo up with the Ghoul, but if they don't have extra powder, they're kind of average when it comes to shooting compared to the Dwarves and the Empire, because everything. It's like they've been like it's like been balanced for esports, for multiplayer game, and this is a single player abilities pretty much, because we are talking about battle skills and technologies which are not present in multiplayer. So when everything is taken into account around extra powder, the extra powder then is nothing special. If they had these things like the other factions and the extra powder was on top of it, well then the extra powder would be something special. So you only have very strong range when you have extra powder. So the first 20% of the ammo, and it's not always convenient to you know, replenish ammo, which they can. Quite unique. It's both a good and a bad thing, and I like to think the devs actually balanced their whole range around the extra powder, which they did a little bit too well. It's almost like it's a, you know, esport game. Those first shots can cause hard morale loss, yes, if you play on normal difficulty.
No brain, no
Or multiplayer. Did I see the worst unit for every faction from video from Legend? No, no. How long is the video? Jukai played Orion a couple of campaigns ago, and we won it without range units, without archers. 30 minutes. Give me a link.
No point. Stupid, stupid.
Yeah, just to watch it. We played Orion without archers. Was a nice campaign. Hey, Ron. We're mixing things around. What do you guys say? Should we watch that video? It's not like we're doing something overly too exciting. There's the carpenter. Ship cook.
attack the curse.
March, you dead
Look at the
bird.
march distance. We do have a really good movement range. The march stance for this faction becomes irrelevant after a certain point. This was extra 5% movement range. I get 30 from the shipbuilding. These are all the shipbuilding admirals. You don't use the other admirals. The regular lords are really bad.
The sea knows my fate.
Where the hell did we put? The first mate is actually quite nice here. I don't think I used it in the past. I might have forgot. Ship competitors here. Funny how we've taken this as a last thing.
Our treasure hoard is higher.
Last building. This is bad. We do get a capacity here. We don't use these units, right? Yeah, we can always raise these ones, and the rest we don't use this army. We do use handguns. Some deck droppers. If they die, we could replace them with this. Okay. Let's see. Wait 5 minutes. Want to make some coffee? Sure, we'll start in 4 minutes.
On deck.
We're starting to make extra money here,
Crew, sally
but we need to make more of pirate coast. We've been kind of slacking with pirate coast.
Captain, report.
I did get 3 armies, and we pretty much stomping since that point, so I didn't really care about that much about income.
Onwards. Get the hands. Journeying. Time to devour.
Admiral of the fleet.
So, clan pestilence down to 3 settlements, and they have no military. Yeah, we don't only need experience per turn. You're right. But we have captive replenishment here, so we can get the last recruitment building. Yeah.
To your king, free Butaz.
We're gonna wait for the population though, it's not ready right now.
Blood kiss of the sea.
Cheap Carbon has saved us over 100k easy this campaign. Easy. Easy 100k.
Swashbuck.
The research back and harassing this, so we'll get points with Dark Elves. Right now, we'll just build up this. Depending what kind of composition I would go. I would definitely go full firepower Blood Harken. So, artillery range, Necrofax Colossi. So, you can basically skip the main deck. You can skip the gun ports. Yeah, you pretty much just need the cannons and the hull. You can raise that the handguns, the direct gunners here. You have more than enough here. Then let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There are 12 buildings, but only there are 10 slots. So what do you skip? You skip main deck, and you eventually get rid of the anchor, and that's it. You have everything. You don't need all these buildings. So skip the main deck and anchor with Luthor Harkon. Anchor when everything is built up. So at this point plus 10 population, you remove anchor and build a last building. Okay, let's go watch that video from Legend. Let me just mute this. Where is it?
Legend of Total. Legend of.
So this video says units you should never recruit for every race. Warhammer 2. Popcorn ready.
Legend of Total War here, and today we're going to be talking about the units that you should never recruit in your campaigns in Total War Warhammer 2. So every faction has a decent variety of units, ranging from units that you should pretty much always recruit if given the chance, and units that you should stay well away from, and even in an emergency situation should never recruit. These are units that you should go the entire campaign without ever recruiting a single one of them. Now, some factions have like big no-no units that you should really stay away from. Other factions' worst units are like, if you recruit it's not that big of a deal. So what I'm going to be doing is kind of like a top 15. There's 15 different races in this game, and I'm going to be covering it from not so worst to the worst. So the units at the very end of this video are the untouchables, the ones that I hate the most, the ones that I highly recommend that you recruit anything but them in your campaigns. So with that being said, we're going to move on now to number 15, the 15th worst unit in a faction. Alright, coming in at the bottom of this list, so not that big of a deal. So at number 15, we've got Bretonnia, and their worst unit is just the Mounted Yeoman. So Bretonnia I've actually found to have a pretty well-rounded roster.
I agree with that.
There are certainly units that I personally
Don't
wouldn't
even need those
recruit very
units.
often. That doesn't necessarily mean they're units you should really stay away from.
So it's a multiplayer unit,
But
of
one
course.
unit that you really shouldn't ever recruit is a Mounted Yeoman, especially on Legendary difficulty. These guys are just downright bad fighters. And they're tier 1 units alongside
Wolf Rider
their
peasants.
counterpart, the Mounted Yeoman Archers. And even though the Archer variant is a little bit more expensive, they are vastly better value. So when you're in desperate need to recruit some cavalry, and you've only got access to tier 1 cavalry building, there's really no reason not to go Mounted Yeoman Archers over Mounted Yeoman. Even when it comes down to price, you're better off purchasing 3 Mounted Yeoman Archers than 4 mounted yeomen. They'll do better. In fact, you can have an entire army of mounted yeomen
Hold
archers,
on,
and it
hold
can
on,
actually
hold
do
on. I don't think I've noticed this before.
reasonably well. Whereas these
This unit has 30 charge bonus. What the hell? Where is the Spanish guy? 30 charge bonus on mounted yeoman. What the fuck? This. That's like multiplayer balance at its best. Is that bad? No, that's actually pretty high. It's pretty high charge bonus. Huh. They have 30 charge bonus with shields on tier 1. Why did they give him so much charge bonus?
guys here, they're shit through and through. But it's not that big of a deal, because if you do recruit them, they're cheap, they're a peasant, whatever, it's not that big of a deal, which is why they're at the bottom of this list. Let's now move on to the number 14 pick.
The only time I would recruit this unit is to troll chat. The only time I would recruit this unit is to troll chat. I do sometimes recruit units to troll the chat, then, you know, we pretend. New meta kappa. Perfect for trolling the chat. Moving on.
Coming in to number 14 spot is the Skaven unit. So, upon evaluating their roster, most of their units seem pretty damn good. But there's one particular unit in their roster that I thought you just don't...
Legend of Total War speaking highly of Skaven. How the times change. I actually watched him play his Legendary campaign, and he said once he would prefer Bretonnian peasants over the Skaven infantry. I mean, when you get familiar with the Skaven firepower, you know, you get to, love Skaven. They're not saying that their melee is, any better, but once you get the full picture of the Skaven, you do learn to love it.
Ever really need to recruit it, especially on legendary difficulty, and you might be surprised to which unit it is. It's actually
pretty much what Shit Wizard says, wasting peasants and yeomen where you can get peasant archers, pretty much.
the clan rat, and the main reason for it is because you've got Skaven slaves. Now you might think Skaven slaves are far worse than clan rats, right? Why would you go Skaven
Maybe a
slaves
tasting,
over
yeah,
clan
maybe.
rats? Well, Skaven slaves have a lot of actual advantages over clan rats. When it comes down to it, what is the role of the clan rat and the Skaven slaves? They have the same role. Their job is to die. Go and die, delay the enemy so that rattling guns and Jezzails and other things can do their job. Now, clan rats are slightly better at their job than Skaven slaves, but they're also immensely more expensive. They're like 4 times more expensive. Now, if you got 4 units of Skaven slaves, 4 units of Skaven slaves would do a vastly better job than 1 unit of clan rats, meaning that at the beginning of a campaign, which is pretty much the only time you should really ever see these units, you're actually better off going with a full army of Skaven slaves with a backup army of Skaven slaves, which would end up being maybe slightly more expensive but vastly more effective than an army that has just one army that's got all clan rats instead of Skaven slaves. And since Skaven slaves don't require a military building or just any building, really just have to own the settlement in order to recruit them, whereas clan rats require a military building, Skaven slaves can be replaced at any time at virtually no cost and it's no big deal. Whereas clan rats, they do actually have some conditions to recruit. Therefore, Skaven slaves are just a little bit more versatile than them, so there's no real reason to ever recruit a clan rat. Not a big deal if you do, but I've always found that Skaven slaves are actually more effective. Anyway, let's now...
Okay, I have a lot to say about this. For starters, this we are pretty much from the campaign perspective of things, so legendary campaign, multiplayer, doesn't exist in these opinions. But we do still mention at the time that, why some units exist is because of multiplayer. Skaven slaves in the campaign, you have to be pretty desperate or you just want to fill an army to use them. Clan rats are basically the Skaven slaves of the campaign. And clan rats are pretty good because they have good technologies, and if you're desperate, even good battle skills. and that it can actually last 10 times longer than the Skaven slaves. So for starters, unless you're really pressured on the economy, there is no reason to recruit Skaven slaves over the clan rats, which clan rats are the Skaven slaves of the campaign. Skaven slaves are pretty much a multiplayer unit. But I would not put neither on the worst unit of the Skaven, neither. For the worst unit of the Skaven is between the Red Ogres, Hellpit Abomination, and the Warpfire Thrower. Why the Red Ogres and the Hellpit Abomination? They have some of the worst buffs in the game, worst base stats. They don't fit the roster and the fighting style of the faction, and terrible technologies. So it's hard to decide between the Red Ogres, Hellpit Abomination, and the Warpfire Thrower. If the money is not taken into account, the Hellpit Abomination will not fit this category. So it's between the Red Ogres and the Warpfire Thrower as the worst unit of the Skaven. Since there exists already 3 to 4 better Skaven units that are pretty much do the same thing a Warpfire Thrower does, the only thing good about the Warpfire Thrower is watching enemies getting incinerated, but it's not an effective unit to use. It lacks range, damage, not convenient to use compared to Globadiers, Mortars, Bombardiers, which are just devastating, Artillery, other various range units. It just doesn't deserve a slot in a Skaven army. Anything other than being fun to watch enemies getting incinerated. There are so many more effective units. The Warpfire Thrower, like, what's the purpose of this unit? So, if the money is not a question, and it's somewhere between the Red Ogres and the Warpfire Thrower. The Red Ogres just shit by design. They don't really fit the campaign. Sometimes we do say, like, you know, this unit is bad because of legend difficulty, but most units in the game can be made work even with legend difficulty due to experience, battle skills, technologies, lords. But Red Ogre is just a bad unit. Outside anywhere than a normal environment, just bad unit. And I don't know what the multiplayer people are talking about Red Ogres being good. I've seen several multiplayer battles, and Red Ogre just hit hard on contact and then just get killed, routed. There was only one situation where I've seen Red Ogre just break through, but it was in a shit unit. It's basically being praised because it's a fast, hard-hitting unit, but it melts no matter what. And the fact there is a frenzy bug existing currently in the game makes Red Ogres worse, even worse. So it's hard to decide between the Red Ogres and Warpfire Thrower. Since the Warpfire Thrower actually has a fun, you know, burn everything, kill everything, but it's not even top 5 in its class, because there are already other 5 better units that are more convenient, stronger, better to use, especially in the firepower armies. I would put Red Ogre still as the worst Skaven unit. I would still put Red Ogre as the worst Skaven unit, but if you take into account that they're just Warpfire Throwers have other 5 better units than them, you know, it's 50-50. Red Ogres and the Warpfire Thrower as the worst Skaven unit.
Move on to the number 13 pick. Coming in at the number 13 slot belongs to the Vampire.
Oh, hold on, I'm not really finished there. The Warlock Engineer does buff Warpfire Thrower, so you can get more range. They have strong technologies, so taking this into account, you can definitely make them work. While Red Ogres, you have to piece of blood to make them work, and they're still not going to perform well. If you take also technology account and more than one Warlock Engineer per army, the Red Ogre is the worst. Unit of the Skaven, because the Skaven monsters just suck. The devs have forgotten about them, and they don't have good buffs. The range units have ridiculous buffs, and the fact that Warlock Engineer exists, we cannot even actually compare Warpfire Thrower with the Red Ogre, because you can have more than one. If you put a second Warlock Engineer in the army, Warpfire Thrower can get good, but there's still much better units to it that do the same thing. But you don't see the green fire, everything getting, you know, vaporized. So Red Ogre is definitely for the worst Skaven unit. The only reason to build that building is just to unlock technologies. Well, if you have a lot of money, the help nominations can give you the quality in a shit tier lord.
Account roster. Upon looking at their roster, most of their units could be used in one way or another. Now obviously I have my preferences, but there was one unit in the roster that stood out as being, you just don't need it. And that unit is actually, and this is going to be a weird one, some people aren't going to understand this, at least until I explain it, but the unit is actually Corpse Carts. What? Corpse Carts? Corpse Carts are really good. Why would you not recruit Corpse Cart? Oh, I hear you, and here's why. Because Corpse Carts are really good, but they're actually redundant, because what you should do instead of recruiting a Corpse Cart is recruit a Necromancer. And since you have the ability to recruit Necromancers basically en masse, they have faction-wide boosting abilities, army boosting abilities, magic, a whole array of other abilities, and it's not that difficult to get them recruitable at like level 16 or 18 or whatever needed so that they can actually get the Corpse Cart mount. And you can actually reduce their upkeep cost by 50% with the Lamian gifts. There's, if you've got access to Necromancers, you really don't ever need to recruit a Corpse Cart, and you will have plenty of access to Necromancers. So it's not that Corpse Cart's a bad unit, it's just that you don't ever really need to recruit it, unless you're in a desperate situation and it's just Raise the Dead and it's available for you. Otherwise, just have an abundance of Necromancers, because they're really good, and that's why they get the number 13 spot. Let's now move on to number 12. Coming in at
I agree with the legend there. The Corpse Cart is just redundant. I also tell this to people. You get Necromancers and you get Corpse Cart there. There is absolutely no point recruiting Corpse Cards, maybe except just the really initial game if you want to get that Vigor Mortis. Maybe get lucky early on Lodestone, but rarely you get exit that one. Vigor Mortis got nerfed, so it's even worse. The unit just makes the rest of the army slower. You just get Necromancers. Necromancers have Corpse Cards. They do take longer to level up to get those Corpse Cards up. Not as long as they used to, but they also act as batteries. They also provide Arcane item slot. So, totally agree there with Legend. I did recommend people just get Necromancers for the Corpse Cards. And I feel like still a lot of people underestimate the Necromancer in the army. Each army should have one Necromancer, unless you specifically don't want a Necromancer in the army. It's just how the vampire magic works, and by not having a Necromancer in the army, you just gimp yourself. You can get so much more power with the Necromancer in the army.
good, and that's why they get the number Corpse. Most of you will probably be able to guess what it is, because most of the Vampire Coast units are actually pretty damn decent. And this unit is, of course, the Bloated Corpse. And I think, to some degree, everybody knows that this is a piece of shit, and that's part of the meme to it. But there really isn't any reason to actually recruit them into your army, unless you are in an absolute desperate situation and you just need to raise one from the dead. That's the only time you would ever use it, and that's primarily because you only ever get to use it once, and the one time you do use it, it basically can't beat anything. And if it can beat anything, it doesn't really matter because it still ends up dead. The only time that this unit actually would really come in handy is going up against extremely high tier infantry armies that have no missile units. So that way, you know, if you're going up against Chaos, for example, throwing it into a chosen unit, that might be okay. But by that point, you should really have a lot of their better units that can deal with those kind of troops anyway. So it's like, it's a unit that would be useful in the late game and not useful in the early game, but you wouldn't ever recruit it in the late game because it's so shit compared to the other units you get. So it's just a unit that just has no place in any part of a campaign. It's basically a living joke. But, you know, sometimes it's funny to watch them pop. Anyway, let's now move on to number 11.
I disagree with this. The Bloated Corpse can give you quite a bit of advantage in various situations, especially in the early game. Sieges. You don't even have to have a full army all the time. You can always just get more Bloated Corpse with the Raise Dead and just blow up stuff. They can blow up stuff by the units that are being tanked by a Rotting Leviathan. They just get there and just blow up a whole elite unit of infantry. Sword Masters, for example, Saurus. So they definitely have their uses. You you want to have an army of 20 units that you don't need to really care about replacing units after a battle. But since the race that exists, and if it works, you always get Blood Corpses already. But even if you don't care about Blood Corpses in the early game, there are still worse units than the Blood Corps for this faction. There are certain units in this faction which are kind of greedy multiplayer units. They only exist there, for to punish your opponents if they don't care about it. And those units are the bombers. The bombers and animated hulks probably purely feel like created for the multiplayer and auto resolve. The bombers not only have 23 speed, but they have such a bad range that you have to either play against the worst enemy, because the AI actually counters them nearly always. That unit is so easy to counter, their range sucks, their speed sucks, and the damage is not even justifiable for how bad they are. So I would probably put the bombers, the infantry bombers. The flying bombers are somewhat useful as a flavor unit, but the gunnery mob bombers on the ground, too slow, too short range, not enough to justify the damage, and even the AI can counter them 9 out of 10 times. Definitely the bombers.
Coming in at number 11 belongs to a unit in the Dark Elf roster, and that unit is the Cold One Knights and Cold One Dread Knights. Primarily because Cold One Knights are a tier 4 unit and the Dread Knights are a tier 5 unit, and they do not perform at those tiers. Meaning that if you've got a settlement at
the Cold
those
One
tiers,
Knights keep
you
getting
should be
nerfed every
recruiting
update. Thanks,
different
multiplayer.
units, and any other unit at those same tiers will perform on average much better than these guys. Generally speaking, on legendary difficulty, Cold One Knights are outperformed by just about every other cavalry unit in the game, primarily because they have lower entity numbers, they're pretty damn slow, and they just don't really dish enough
I agree what he
damage
says,
out.
this, but it's
Even
still
when
not worse than
fighting
unit of Dark
against
Elves.
things that they're actually good against, they tend to lose more often than
I
not,
agree with this.
making them ultimately
The cold ones do get constantly nerfed because of multiplayer. But you can make this unit works with all the buffs. All the buffs, you can make them work. But coming from the legend, this doesn't surprise me because this unit has ridiculously powerful range. And when you have a ridiculous powerful range, the cavalry units just don't exist. So I can see where he's going. But you have to focus your army around the melee. And the melee, is flavor that got butchered for whatever difficulty aspect. But still, it's far from the worst Dark Elf units.
pretty worthless unit. They're okay at the beginning of the campaign, but again, they're a tier 4 and tier 5 unit. Only Mal's Darkblade would ever really make any good use out of it because you get it at the start. So it's a pretty worthless unit overall. It really needs to be rung down into tier 3 and tier 4 respectively, and that's why it's getting the number 11 spot. Let's now move on to number 10.
Yeah, I disagree with this. I do agree that this unit is over-nerfed. They don't have enough health for tier 4 and tier 5 units. Their stats don't justify it. They pretty much just miss health. This is probably because of multiplayer. If this unit had more health or ways to increase their health or technologies, to separate from the multiplayer, would actually be a pretty good unit, especially Dread Knights. The Knights are hit hard, especially when you build them up, use some magic. So it's just because of the health, you can discard these units, and you're always disappointed when you use them. Cavalry can be okay if you're desperate, but this is not the worst unit of the Dark Elves. The worst unit of the Dark Elves, I'm surprised, he chose Cold One Knights over the Witch Elves, for example. For me, it's between the Bleak Swords and the Witch Elves as the worst Dark Elf units. The Bleak Swords just suck. They just suck. Bleak Swords, due to the nature of the faction, is weaker than the Emperor Swordsman. A Dark Elf, elves, who are pretty much, supernatural when you compare them to the humans of the Empire. Bleak Swords, sword infantry over the Dark Elves, the edgy boys, weaker than the Emperor Swordsman. So it's between the Bleak Swords and Witch Elves. The Witch Elf, kind of like a niche unit that just dies. They're just like really, really bad slayers, but instead of anti-large, they have anti-infantry. And since the difficulty totally cancels out what the Witch Elves are supposed to do, the Witch Elf is probably one of the units in the game that doesn't even make any sense to exist in a campaign. It might be used in multiplayer, I don't know, but in normal environment the ability could make sense. But there is really no point recruiting Bleak Swords since the Dread Spears exist. So it's hard to say between the Bleak Swords and the Witch Elves. The Witch Elves probably should be put as the worst unit of the Dark Elves, just because they're so underwhelming for what they're supposed to be. It's between Bleak Swords and Witch Elves. I'm not gonna pick which one. I would not put the Cavalry as the worst for the Dark Elves.
10. Taking the number 10 spot belongs to a unit in the Lizardmen roster, and that unit is the Bastiladon, all 4 of them. Now, they're not necessarily weak units, and starting off with one can be quite effective, but why would you ever recruit one? That's the big question. And the reason is
what you said at the time makes sense.
And it's primarily not because they're weak, but because they're recruited alongside Stegodons. They are recruited from the same building. If you've got access to Stegodons, the only reason why you would choose Bastiladons over a Stegodon is because Bastiladons are cheaper. And when it comes down to Lizardmen, don't bitch out on the price, get the quality, because the Lizardmen have some of the highest quality units in the game, and it just so happens that their best unit in their roster is the tier 4 Stegodon. So when you've got this building, I would never choose any of these other 3 over this. It's not that these are their worst units, it's just that the Stegodon is their best unit. Very much worth the price. Now you might be thinking, oh, but the solar engine, it does more damage. Yeah, but it doesn't have as much range, and then you still have to deal with the fact that it's a Bastiladon. Ah, but the Revivification Crystal can heal them. Yeah, but so can a Life Slant. Oh, but it can revive them. Yeah, but it doesn't revive many entities, and it's really kind of piss weak. It's just not very good unit. And the Ark of Sotek, it's alright. It's kind of like well, look, it's a bit of flavor. But apart from that, its ability it's meh at best. It's okay when Tehenuin starts off with one, but when it just comes down to it, they are sorely outclassed by Stegodons. And since there's no unit cap on them, it doesn't make any sense to choose a Bastiladon over a Stegodon, unless you do Rite of Primeval Glory and hold on to them for a little while. That's really the only reason you would ever get them. And that's why they get the number 10 spot. Let's move on now to number 9.
I have to agree here with the legend, because Bastiladon is unlocked on the same building with a Feral Stegodon. This is just bad design. It should be on a lower tier. If you actually see the building here, he opens.
And that's why they get the number.
This is just bad design. They're bad because of the bad design, so I have to agree with here. So you can see both Feral Bastiladon and the Feral Stegodon unlocked on the same tier. And this there is various examples of this in the game. You have Chaos Trolls and you have Armored Chaos Trolls. Same tier 3 building. So if the this building actually had a tier 2, which should had if developers knew what they were doing, Feral Stegodon should have been a tier 2 unit, and it would actually make sense to actually recruit this unit early and not just spam stuff like this. So just because the Feral Stegodon exists, the Feral Bastiladon is definitely one of the worst Lizardmen units. A couple other mentions could be the Cold One Cavalry and the Dread Saurian, but the Dread Saurian, is just massive health, massive stats, and it's easy to counter, but the AI might have issues countering it, so you can't really, you could just complain that they forgot missile resistance there, but it's far from their worst unit. The Cold One Cavalry is pretty bad, but this is due to multiplayer and the Cavalry and melee being bad because of the difficulty and all the various melee buffs the AI gets, special melee defense. The Spear Riders have some use, So it's between the Cold One cavalry and the Feral Bastilian, but you know, the same argument can be made here. The Cold One cavalry exists, Cold One spear cavalry exists. These are not tier 2 and tier 3 units. Those are both tier 3 units. There is never a reason to recruit anti-infantry cavalry over anti-large infantry. It's pointless. And there is never a reason to recruit a Feral Bastilian over Feral Stegadon. So I have to agree there with Legend. If the developers put Feral Bastilian in tier 2, it would make total sense. If the Cold One cavalry is on tier 2, it would make total sense as well. But the way this is set, it's basically the argument of the Chaos Trolls. They're just better unit on the same building. So I agree with Feral Bastilian being the worst unit of the Lizardmen. Not far behind the Cold One cavalry.
Hold on to them for a little while. That's really the only reason you would ever get them, and that's why they get the number 10 spot. Let's move on now to number 9. Taking the number 9 spot goes to a unit in the Wood Elf roster. Now the Wood Elves and Arguelon, or I guess Talston and Arguelon, are kind of different to other races in that their army rosters will be quite different.
I'm a fan of the
has
Terran Riders.
Much better focus on high tier archers.
They can prioritize targets while you're hitting, while you're basically doing nothing with your Saurus units. Don't be one of those people that just put a full army of Saurus infantry. You need some units to go with them, and the Pterodons are perfect to go with them in the beginning. I did use them in the past with Last Defenders, and the Terran Riders are amazing with Tic-Tac-Toe.
Because it doesn't cost amber, whereas Arguelon will focus more on forest spirits, you know, more of the tree men and the forest dragons and stuff like that. But they can pretty much both agree that the Hawk Riders are shit. So, looking at it in terms of Talson's perspective, they cost amber, so that's already a reason to disband it at the start, and it's expensive, and it has very little damage, and it's super squishy. It just really has very little impact when, even if you use it really well. It's a high micromanagement unit. They're very easy to get shot out of the sky. You know, on legendary difficulty, Fellbats will basically beat them in melee. They're just not a good unit. And to add insult to injury, when you have limited build slots, have a shit unit require a separate build slot. I'm just never going to build that building. It's not like I'm going to build Eagles either. They nearly made this list as well. It's just that Hawk Riders were worse than them. They would have been like the next on this list. Fuck it, let's just say both of these units are units you should never recruit, because you should never build this building. There's no reason to ever do so. There are vastly better options for both Talston and for Arguelon. So that's why it gets the number 9 spot on this list. Let's now move on to number...
Totally agree with this. Couldn't say it better myself. Couldn't say it better myself. Moving on.
Number 8. Coming in at number 8 belongs to a unit in the Dwarf roster. And seeing that I've chosen Karak Kadrin to show off here, you know what unit it is right away. The unit, of course, are Slayers. Now, this is one that I think people are going to argue with me about on this one, but I'm putting my foot down, and even though I've done a Slayer-only campaign and won, I'm putting my foot down and saying you don't ever need to recruit a Slayer. I'll go into a little bit of detail as to why that is. So, firstly, we go into their recruit system. So, this was much in the same way as the Wild Ride. No, what are they called? The Hawk Riders. They have their own build slot, and there's not much else that building does, apart from provide Untainted. Most of your regions aren't going to need this. You will need it in some of the provinces, but they're mostly going to be frontier provinces, which you're probably not going to be recruiting from anyway. So I'm not saying you would never build a Monument of Grimnir, but it's most likely that you would build it to get rid of the vampiric corruption or chaos corruption, whatever kind of corruption, and then demolish it for something else, because you do have fairly limited build slots in this game, and there's a lot of other things in this build tree that's actually really good. There's a lot of economic things that you really need to build. Now, Slayers are strong units, but they're not cheap either. Now, no unit in the Dwarf roster is cheap, but when considering the full potential of the Dwarf, it's not in their melee potential, which is, which is all a Slayer is. The full potential of the Dwarfs lie in their artillery. Those are their best units. Now, you can't just spam artillery. Artillery needs support. So you would have some missile units like Quarrelers or even some Gyrocopters, some handgunners like Thunderers would be good as well, and you would need a frontline unit. Now, what is the best frontline unit in the Dwarf roster? In my opinion, it's the Ironbreaker, and that's at the same tier as a Giant Slayer. Or if you're not at tier 4, you've still got access to Longbeards, which is at the same tier as Slayers. So at the same tier, there are better options. Now, even though Longbeards won't get as many kills in battle as a unit of Slayers, or a Ironbreaker might not get as many kills in battle, sometimes they will actually get more, depends on the situation, than say a Giant Slayer, one thing is definitely clear, is that they will last a hell of a lot longer, and the longer they last, that means more ammunition.
Come on,
can be
guys,
spent
take it
of the
easy.
artillery, of the gunners, of the
No
gyrocopters,
worrying
everything,
here.
allowing you to whittle down whatever beasts, monsters,
Just
or
opinions
regular
here.
units the enemy has. Whereas if you had a front line of Slayers, they will kill a few units, and then if you're outnumbered, they're just not going to perform. And that's what the big problem is. In situations where the odds are in your favor, Slayers are fine, but they are not the kind of unit you need when the odds are against you. You need units like artillery that are able to perform way above their pay grade, and that's just the problem. They're not bad units, it's just that the Dwarves have just got vastly better units in their roster, and since they use a entirely other build slot in order to recruit, there's no real reason to ever get them. So
I have to disagree here.
use a entirely
Dwarves
other
being
build
my
slot
favorite
in order to
faction,
recruit.
I have definitely something to say here. First off, you can always fit at least one unit of Giant Slayers in the army. You don't have to, but you can. And you don't use them as the front line, you don't even use them at the flanks. You use them behind. If enemy has units that could go behind on your range at the side, or your artillery like the flying units, cavalry units, you put the Giant Slayers whenever you might expect getting hit, and the Giant Slayers will just murder that cavalry unit, the unit of Vargeists, Terrorgeists will just murder it. The range units will not be enough to kill it, they might damage it, but if Giant Slayer will just finish it. They're fast, they can get there, they will kill it. You don't put it in the front line, so you just keep it in the back. One unit, you can definitely find a spot for it. That building is a little bit inconvenient, that is true. You don't really have to use this unit, but having one in the army can definitely save you some headaches and some bells. As for the worst units of the Dwarves, well, we'll not be mentioning Hammerers here, because you know they don't really fit the roster here since the Giant Slayer is going to introduced, but at least they get good on the same building as the Ironbreakers. The Miners are a multiplayer unit, but ever since they put them on the core building, easily accessible unit, you can't really say bad things about Miners. I just really wish they had Siege Attacker, the Miners. There is a time where this building, becomes irrelevant. So having Miners here, it's not bad in an emergency, but you can use regiments now in emergency. For the worst units, some of the worst unit mentions are the Bolt Thrower, Gyro Bomber, and I still pick Bolt Thrower over the Gyro Bomber. The Dwarves have 3 tier 5 units, the Flame Cannon, Gyro Bomber, and the Trollhammer Torpedo. You can actually get a good value out of Trollhammer Torpedo, but they're just basically better units than this. They're just like a little bit range, but they're master engineers, so you can make Trollhammer Torpedo work. We did make it work in the past. They're still better than units like the Hammers. But Bolt Thrower can get buffed by multiple engineers. They can still target units, keep shooting all the time. It is true they're worse than a unit of Quarrelers, but a Gyro Bomber, I don't know what developers were thinking when they were designing this unit. Not only they put more effort and time into redesigning the main gun, but they actually made it worse. They actually made it worse. When you're playing a Dwarf campaign, sometimes a Dwarf campaign you will finish and lose interest before you even touch tier 5. So all the best stuff on the Dwarves is already tier 3, tier 4. Some on tier 2. In a single player campaign you have Dwarf Warriors, you never really need Miners, but the Miners can have their use. So can even compare them to how bad the Gyro Bomber is. You know, the solution to fix the gyro bomber is simple. The gyrocopters have bombs. The gyro bomber have bombs. There are 4 entities in the gyrocopter. Gyrocopters are a great unit, especially the brimstone gun. Kind of makes the regular a little less so, but it's overkill against the infantry better than the iron drakes. Make the gyro bomber have 4 entities, but they don't make the gyro bomber have 4 entities like the gyrocopters. They just make the main gun even worse. The main gun shoots several volleys, several shots into the same entity, and it just overkills with damage and wastes ammunition all the time. It's one of the worst attacks in the game. You can't even justify this as a tier 3 unit, let alone tier 5. The bombs are just overkill waste. Overkill waste, because dwarves have million waves to dominate infantry. Dominate. It's like one of the worst units in the game, and simply because it's a tier 5, it just makes it even worse. Developers, easy fix, just make the gyro bomber have 4 entities. That's so hard. The fact that the gyro bomber doesn't have more bombs than a gyrocopter because there are 4 of them there. People say the gyro bomber has more bombs than the gyrocopter, but it's not true. That's not true. Sometimes the performance is going to be the same with the bombs. And the fact the bomb don't register kills, the bombardment does not register kills in this game properly, makes it even worse. So you're throwing bombs, you see damage dealt, see kills, just all overkill wasted. Organ guns will just do the same shit even better. One organ gun will outperform 3 gyro bombers. So it's like, we can go on about this, but the gyro bomber, it's for the, you know, for the plebs, for the sheep, you know. Look at those bombs murdering all those goblins, chaos marauders. What the hell, man? Organ gun, look at all those chosen dead. The gyro bomber hasn't even gotten there.
There's no real reason to ever get them. So again, it's not that they're a bad unit, it's that they're inconvenient. That's really all there is to it. And that's why they're getting this particular spot. So let's now move on to number 7.
The gyro bomber either
Coming
needs
in
more
at number
bombs or
7
more
is
entities.
a unit
As simple as
that
that.
belongs to the Tomb King roster. Now the Tomb Kings are a pretty unique race in that all of their units, with the exception of their basic skeleton,
Worst unit of Tomb Kings, Carrion. Moving on.
have a certain degree of supply, which can be increased by building barracks. And their economy is less so based on making money and then just spamming an elite unit, but more so about building various barracks so that you can have a lot of the different varieties of troops because you will have many armies. However, there is a unit in this roster that even if you did have supply for it, there is no reason to recruit it because the unit is so ridiculously weak. And that is a unit of Carrion. Even basic skeletons have a greater purpose in the army than Carrion. Carrion's primary purpose is basically to fly down on an enemy archer unit and pin it down. But the problem is on legendary difficulty, more often than not, the Carrion will still end up losing the combat. Now the thing is, you might think, yeah, but it delayed that unit for a bit. Well, do you know what else delays a unit for a bit? A bunch of shields. And the base tier of skeletons have a 50% block rate, so even if the archer used up pretty much all of its ammunition, it's not really going to do that much worth when it comes down to the skeleton just blocking most of those shots. So in terms of its actual role, it's actually better suited by a basic unit that doesn't even require a supply, and therefore there's really no reason to ever recruit a single Carrion in your campaign. So fuck off, Carrion. Anyway, let's now move on to number 6. Taking the number 6 spot belongs to a unit in the Greenskin roster, and that unit is Trolls. Now, it's less to do necessarily with Trolls and more to do with actually their build tree. Although Trolls, they definitely are terrible units, and I would never under normal circumstances recruit them. I'm also sort of including Giants in this category as well, because as we've discussed previously, building up a strong campaign also means developing your settlements well. And on legendary difficulty, things that you have to build are things like you need to make sure that public order is built. You need to make sure that money is built. You need to make sure that you've got things that are increasing your heroes because you're going to want lots of them because they're good. And once you've done all of those things, there's usually like maybe 1 or 2 build slots left for something to recruit.
I can definitely see, you know, where he's coming from here. You can save. This is a ridiculously overpriced building. I did made a video about the greenskins and what's wrong with them. The worst faction of the in the Mortal Empires. This is just a big problem in the design of the greenskins. They don't stand out in anything. I suggested the greenskins should stand out in their building construction costs. So this costing 5,000 and this costing 15,000 is the reason why a lot of people ignore this. And I can see Legend ignoring this. The Rock Lobber exists. You don't need to build trolls, but definitely see where he's coming from on this. This is just a broken faction, and it's, you know, hard to even, you know, talk about stuff like this. Economy wise, building wise, yeah, unless it's a tier 5 capital, this building is never building. But trolls are far from the worst unit. Trolls basically are in the garrisons, and you can say trolls are the worst unit. Trolls will win you so many unwinnable sieges, it's out of control. If you ever played greenskins, you'll learn to love the trolls. The trolls win siege battles, defensive siege battles especially. You might have just said here this is the worst building. The Wolf Rider is by far the worst unit of the greenskins, and the only reason it exists is because of the multiplayer. It's like I have seen legendary Wolf Riders attack my artillery, peasants by the way. I told my peasants, I removed all my peasants from the artillery. I told them to leave the siege engines and to attack the Wolf Riders. They won. My artillery crews have defeated the Wolf Riders. So this is just a big problem with the greenskins. These buildings can be ignored, but trolls are far from the worst greens. They're actually one of the best, especially because of the sieges. They win siege battles.
And those units are usually Black Orcs, Ragnarok Spiders, or Doom Divers.
Well, you use trolls. With other units together because they have no leadership in a real battle. So they would require experience and veterans. They have good battle skills. But the fact the Rock Lobbers exist, you don't need to use trolls. But in the siege defense, they are one of the best units. Trolls are pretty much a flavor unit. You need to make them work. You use them together with other units when they get stronger. When they get stronger, you can use them pretty much as a front line or a charging unit. Preferably with another unit. They do have a lot of damage and they can survive if they have the leadership. And they do get leadership later. I do build this building pretty much in every Greens campaign in my tier 5 city.
And that doesn't leave much room for basically giant, stinking, vomiting cowards. These guys on legendary difficulty just don't stay and fight. They have a very bad habit of going into combat, taking a bit of damage, and then routing, coming back, and then routing. And they do that 3 times and then they shatter. I've seen trolls with all of their entities.
The buildings which we pretty much don't build as this building here. This goes in a tier 5 city. Spamming just spiders is not good. Mixing spiders and giants is better. The fact the giant doesn't have technology and spider has also makes it better. But the greenskins have so many problems that it's like, you know, we're not gonna be hitting, you know, opening that bag of worms, shit, whatever. It's definitely a flavor unit that got weakened over time. There is no reason to recruit it. You just get Rock Lobbers. But Wolf Rider, he's actually saying units do not recruit, and the fact he says that he's not recruiting trolls. What this means, he's recruiting Wolf Riders. Guys, say this out loud. Units you should never recruit for every race. Not even a mention of the Wolf Riders. Do you guys recruit Wolf Riders? Are you guys multiplayer players? You're saying the trolls are worse than the Wolf Riders? It's just because of the building slot. It's just because of the building slot.
As in they're all alive and half of their health and they've shattered. They're not good units, they're unreliable. They're okay when defending a settlement, but you shouldn't be recruiting your armies based on that, and your garrisons will automatically get a unit of trolls if the situation warrants it, like if you've built the defensive building, and so therefore you don't actually ever need to build a troll cave. In any of my greenskin campaigns, I never build this building, and if I do end up getting it, it's because I've captured a settlement that converted a building to this, but then I immediately destroy it. So what it just comes down to is that the greenskins have vastly better units in their roster, and the thing is, their units aren't even that good in the first place. So they're the worst of the worst, these trolls, and by extension, giants. And that's why they get the number 6 spot.
I disagree with that
Now
totally.
let's move on to number 5.
He didn't even mention
in
Wolf
number
Riders
5 is a
once.
unit in the
Even though
Beastman
the Wolf
roster.
Riders exist,
So this unit is
Feels
the
bad, man.
giant. Now, it's not necessarily because giants are bad troops, even though they are. They're basically only good at the beginning of the campaign, and you can't recruit them at the start. So the real reason that we would never go ahead and recruit one is primarily because of the way their recruitment system works. So just like the other reasons with other races for their worst units, when it comes down to it, growth is precious. There's a lot of things in here that you need to build first. You need to get this reduced upkeep cost stuff down. You need to get Bray Shamans. You need to get Gorbils. And by the time you've built all of those, this is usually pretty expensive. And the thing is, you should have already gotten access to the Bray Shamans before you even think of that. And it's very important to increase your capacity for Bray Shamans. And it just so happens you have a perfect alternative to the giant here in Cygors. Cygors are in almost every way better than giants. And they're the same tier. Now, they're a little bit more expensive, but in my opinion, they vastly make up for that in value. Because Cygors are... They're decent in melee. They're not as good as giants, but they're actually really good artillery pieces. And if you spam Cygors, there's very few things that most races can actually do against that. There are just very few counters. In fact, some AI races, AI Beastman herds, will sometimes start off with 5 Cygors.
Economics.
And those are the hardest ones to deal with. Now, if it had started off with 5 giants, that's just not even a concern, really. Cygors are vastly better than giants, and when it just comes down to it, I would build literally every single other one of these buildings before I built the giant one, because it's so unessential. And in fact, even when I had just that...
Well, gotta agree with him on this one. The Sendiker building, the Razorgar building, and the Giant building are... there's like really no reasons to build these buildings, but the Giants are still a better option than the other two. But there is no really point building Giants when you can get Cygors. That's totally true. The Beastman Giant can have massive damage because of the slug skin, but still. This is just one of the 3 unit groups that you don't really recruit in a Beastman campaign. It's like flavor units, and the Giant is the worst out of the 3. The least worst out of the 3.
One build slot left, I'd probably still prioritize recruiting another Lord, because I just wouldn't ever get a giant. I just wouldn't get them. And that's why they're getting this spot on this list. Now let's move on to something completely different at number 4. Coming in at number 4 is a unit for the Norskins, and would you believe it? It's, drumroll, the Giant. Okay, so looking at the Giant this time, what's its problem? It's the same as always. It's a mediocre unit. At least this time it doesn't have its own separate building. So this is a building that you would actually get. But this is the same problem as the Bastillodons.
Giants are only good in Warhammer 1.
The same building that you can recruit giants from, you can get War Mammoths. And War Mammoths, which is a tier 4 unit, is better than a tier 5 unit, the Norscan Giant. In fact, I wouldn't even really worry too much about War Mammoth War Shrines. So at least with the Bastillodons, they were at the same tier as the Stegodons. But this unit here, this should be flipped. Norscan Giants should go down to tier 4, and War Mammoths should go up to tier 5, because they're not only the best unit in the Norscan roster, but they're actually one of the best units in the game, period. There's just about nothing that can beat a War Mammoth, and there's a lot of things that can beat a Norscan Giant. So from the same building, why would you ever bother wasting your time even looking at a fucking Norscan Giant? Anyway, let's move on.
Yep, totally agree with this one. Norscan Giant is the worst Norscan unit.
On to number 3, which again will be
At least there are flying units actually add something
Coming
to
in
the
at
army.
number 3 is a unit in the Chaos roster, and can you guys guess it? It's Giants once again. Can you believe it? Because the exact same reason as it is for the Beastmen. They got their own separate building. Why would you ever build that over Shaggoths? which are like the best units in the game. Well, you know, for the Chaos roster at least. So it's just there's no point making the same points over and over again. It's got the same building tree. You guys know at this point.
You also don't start with Kolek. Prince Evil is the best starting lord. You need to battle that building for Kolek. Giving that building here, get Dragonor Shagot. Why the giants exist in the game? Dragonor Shagot just better. Only the AI uses giants. Because the CA forgot to make the AI Chaos through Dragonor Shagots. Let's agree with that as well.
Recruited. Now let's move on to number 2. Taking the number 2 spot goes to a unit in the High Elf roster. And that unit is, of course, a giant. Just kidding, there are no giants in the High Elf roster. No, that unit belongs to the White Lion of Trace, or whatever it's pronounced as. It's a White Lion of Trash. Now, just about every single reason previously for the other items on this list.
Come on, man, you can't make White Lions the worst team when a Great Eagle exists.
Now, on paper, they don't look like they're bad units, but in practice, they're absolutely horrendously bad. And that's largely because when you consider the faction as a whole, every faction has a strength and weaknesses. The High Elf strengths are archers. They've got some of the best archers in the game, and dragons. Now, what do archers and I guess dragons need in order to be supported? Well, dragons basically just need a life mage, then you're sorted. But going dragon spamming is very expensive. It's not what I would.
Well, he's not far the White Lions being the worst unit on the High Elves. You see this building slot? It gives me brain damage. I can't even look at it. These are the worst High Elf units in the game. This is like not do we even the same mode? You guys seen my High Elf campaigns? Why ever build this building? We get so many suggestions to make this better. This is a absolutely horrendous shit design. Makes me sick.
I think is more effective is archer spamming. Now, you can archer spam right from the start. You know, these tier 1 archers, you can use them well into the game, and they're fine because they've got good range, good amount of ammunition. You know, their missile damage isn't particularly high, but that doesn't really matter that much. It's only going to struggle against particularly heavily armored units. But of course, later on in the campaign, when you're going for Sisters of Avalon, these ones really do some damage. No, so we're talking about the White Lions. What's their damn problem? Well, firstly, of course, they've got their own specific building, which they do share with a Great Eagle. Now, a Great Eagle is that's not particularly good in the High Elf roster, but I've actually grown to kind of semi-appreciate the Great Eagles. If you wanted to recruit 1 or 2 of them in your army, I would sort of.
The only time you gotta appreciate the Great Eagle when you pull a victory out of your ass.
You can
and any other unit could do it in that slot if you're desperate.
And that's the way I personally prefer to go about it because they're faster, stronger, and can get immortality and various other bonuses. So if you want an eagle, I'd go that way. So again, with all the other factions, you've got limited build slots, and there's so many buildings here that you need to build. You need to build the economy.
He's not wrong with us with this one. The building is shit. Never reason to build it except for the Tyrion's quest.
Capacity for nobles, you need to increase your capacity.
But I still put Great Eagle as the worst High Elf unit.
Capacity for mages. Now you might.
Why do they give this faction Great Eagles when the Phoenixes exist? Probably just to justify the shit building.
Just build this in the minor settlement. Well, that's cool. That's fine. Usually you got to build a port and then these 2 buildings as well. So it doesn't really leave much room for this. You're building that at the cost of something else. And then when you consider how this unit actually performs, they're terrible. Most of the time when they're in battle, like, they get so few kills, especially late in the campaign. It's primarily because on very high difficulty, the AI get bonuses to their melee. And these guys only know how to melee. And their stats just aren't very good. And the thing is, if they were there to protect archers, like, even spearmen do a better job. Now, spearmen, this is the Slayer problem, basically. Sure, they will do more damage than spearmen, but spearmen hold for longer. And if the spearmen can hold for as long as possible, then the archers can offload more of their ammo, do the damage that the spearman doesn't need to do because the archer covers for it. And there's lots of things you can do to boost the amount of ammo that the archers can do because they can vastly outperform. That, you know, they can kill 2, 3, even 4 times their worth in any given battle. Whereas a White Lion of
the Eagles should never be a unit for the High Elves. It should just be ability to summon them. It's like, but that's the rocket science for developers, though. How hard is to make the fucking ability to summon the eagles? Why there has to be a unit? That unit doesn't fit the game. We play multiplayer here or campaign. What the hell?
Of trash, they will struggle to deliver 50% of their value in any given battle. And this is primarily why their ranks so highly on this list. I've just never seen them be effective. Now let's move on to the number 1 spot, the creme de la creme of worthless fucking units in this game. Taking the number 1 spot goes to a unit in the Empire roster. And I would wager a guess that most of you guys already predicted that it was going to be this at the number 1 spot. Because what else could it have been, really? You know, some of the items on this list were just really just, oh, you know, that'll do. But this one here, this one had to be in this spot. And it's the War Wagon. Of course it's the War Wagon. This unit is really the only unit in the game that I can say with absolute certainty that you should, under no circumstance, regardless of whatever difficulty, regardless of whichever campaign you're playing, whether you're playing as Marcus Wolfheart, Golden Order, or Reichland, you should never, ever, under any circumstance, ever recruit a War Wagon. Literally every single unit is better than this unit in the Empire roster. You know, if you are desperate to recruit something and that's all that's available, you can always recruit archers, because honestly, archers are better.
I'm disappointed. How is not carrying first on this list or the Wolf Riders?
This guy's biggest problem.
You can find uses for the War Wagon.
Unit.
It's not just about damage. It's also about having the mass and move around.
And when it goes
block
into melee,
damage.
it's extremely fragile.
Take damage, harass.
It's a missile chariot that doesn't act as a good missile unit or a good chariot. So it's bad
both.
at everything that it attempts to do. And it doesn't deliver its value. And I've seen this unit use up all of its ammo shooting into the backs of skinks, not killing that unit. And I just thought to myself, how could they implement this unit into the game? It doesn't make any sense. The only thing I could think that this thing would actually be good against is bloated corpses. Because basically you would have this unit charge into a bloated corpse to get rid of it. That's the only thing I could think of that this would be useful for, you know, in terms to actually get your value. Because a bloated corpse actually wouldn't do very much damage to a War Wagon, I don't think. But apart from that, these guys...
I mean, this is his, opinion,
what?
Of course.
I very, very rarely get any Saving Your Disaster campaigns sent into me with people with War Wagons in their army. Because even the worst players in this game know that this unit here is a giant piece of shit. It's not a giant, it's just a giant piece of shit. But yeah, that's my list. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Hope you found it entertaining as well. I do try to exaggerate a lot of this stuff as well. Some of these units aren't really, you know, that bad.
But I'm disappointed. No Wolf Riders on this list? God damn, man. No Wolf Riders. No Wolf Riders. I mean, I'd definitely agree completely with some of those choices. Definitely. But no Wolf Riders. God damn, now the CA gonna watch that shit. You know, the Legendary War is after all probably the most popular regarding Total War when it comes to legendary campaigns. So they might actually see that, and we get buffed, trolls buffed. So we have even strong garrison. But Wolf Riders, come on! They need AP damage. They need health.
Oh my
Give them
God.
tech.
Have you seen that shit? Holy shit! What the hell?
He's one from every faction. This Kofishi. He picked one from every faction. I agree that troll building is can be ignored with the greenskins. It's a bad building, but that's a problem with the greenskins, not really with the trolls. You might not know that Wolf Riders exist. Okay, let's go back to this campaign.
Curses. See.
I recommend the crash. Check at the start of this video. We'll eliminate the Clan Pestilence here. They do have a couple more settlements.
Master.
They could go anoint this, so we'll get the defense building there. Tlankland is in the north, so I can just get the money here. They're finishing off the Drowned and the Clan Pestilence because they're so useless here. And working towards an alliance with Dark Elves. When you're completing Luther's quest, probably never. We can watch YouTube videos the whole stream sheet visit.
Time for battle. More blood, more power.
Legend of Lore has a lot of these videos. Sequel lore videos. Charge bonus. Speed for the Rotting Promedians, Rotting Leviathan. Speed one is actually pretty nice. Put them to 49 now. Get one more generation here.
My domain. Back to your ranks.
What do we have here? We got a belt skills, we got a campaign skills. I guess we'll get some missile defense next. There's a Terrorgeist, the missile defense is very nice.
King of the Vampire Coast.
I do have a feeling there's gonna be some unpredictable damage here.
Tread in, you drag.
This is, you know what, does make no sense. We have two deck gunners, which have over 100 range on top of this unit, and they still somehow these units do damage. This is a zero casualty bell.
All their valuable. Keep up now. Cutthroats, kill. No pirate.
Why did I occupy this? Because I didn't raise it. Not sure where the hell those beastmen went.
You stand before the supreme ruler of Nagaroth.
Shield Wizard rank 24. We have 25 magic resist here. Now they have
Yes.
40 magic resist on top of 40 physical resistance. This is basically 4% ward save. Like in the Grinson Cavalry, Squeak Hoppers. How many settlements did they have? They could do some vacant mulling here. 3 settlements.
Get on. The galleon awaits.
I think it's this one, and this one.
I thirst. About time.
I get rid of Malik, yeah.
Fight. The dead will fight.
Wolf Rider should get technology That gives them armor piercing damage. Flat armor piercing damage. Like 6. Should be 2 technologies for the Wolf Riders or 1 that gives them 2 stats. Like physical resist and armor piercing damage could make the Wolf Riders usable.
Fleet Admiral!
Advance! Let it begin! Ready!
There's 2 groups of guns here.
Admiral!
Oui, sir! Orders! Storm them! Off deck!
Vampire Captain! Aye, sir!
Moving! See!
Everybody on guard mode.
Pirate of the Undead!
Let it begin!
I'm here!
Fleet Captain!
Why is the coffee gone? Didn't know during the video. I did.
Admiral of the Fleet.
How is this looking? It's a 4 coins. Did raise this settlement. Now that we have actually gotten an easy way to deal with those guys down there, occupying this did make sense. Not like we did the Paholaxa here. To restore his mind,
Undead Raiders. Admiral of the Fleet. Admiral of the Fleet.
to Harkon 35. Got all the bell skills. All the bell skills. Lucky Charm is the best thing to get for Terragast. Wait, sort of Kane, don't know, don't care. "17 seconds, 32 seconds. They can't even put in the right order. Armor, melee defense, speed, melee defense, armor, speed. It's 9 instead of 12. Atlas is good because they have also sponsors infantry. 12, 9. Guess I forgot to actually standardize these things.
They could go either. An unknown. A steadfast.
One is going up. This one is on the campaign map.
Just say so.
Looks like they're recruiting a new army here.
Fleet captain, report at once, Admiral.
I think they're gonna destroy that city in the north. So we can go south. I actually can take this province here. This is gonna just combine these territories. One of these armies should go south though. How are you taking the High Sentinel? Well, move this one to take this and then just get this back now that we have the money restored. Doubled our money since last time.
Sail away. Wave treading.
There are two beastmen factions that would annoy Lustre right now as well. Probably just ignore this one for now. Oh, Dragon Time got destroyed, one less to annoy us there. Nice.
I thirst over land. The dead.
Look at this balance of
will
power,
fight.
it's almost fully yellow. And proper.
Sacred. More blood. Blood, more power.
We'll try to recruit something somewhere. Shirivas can stay here, take this province and wait for the fight of chaos. They still have these two settlements, I think.
Sea dog. Yes.
There's a ship computer here.
My madness is not
The
weak.
Dark Elves are taking this. Doesn't matter. This will let the rebels destroy this one then.
I am the pirate king.
Oh my god. Where's the region here? The depth guard, the left one doesn't have it now.
Goddamn lie.
Definitely sick stuff like this.
No equal.
Cutthroats.
We'll occupy and let the rebels destroy it.
Crazy. Not stupid.
Don't need Paholaksa. I have to raise 3 Lizard settlement. Tlaqua, are you fucking serious? We have to go to Southlands. If you want to do that.
Council of the Wit.
1,000 lashes. Course plotted. I hunger for blood. Onwards!
We're taking a whole lot of only two tier 2 garrisons, so we'll have trouble defending there. We have to send somebody south.
King of the Vampire Coast.
Can we even get here? We can get Scotty or Jano.
No scum!
It's way too much armor to defeat that even with their reinforcements. But I don't want him to go here. Hey Mojo, what do you miss? Been watching some video from Legend. Other than that, nothing really. Still get spells. So the Clan Pestilence could just wreck them all here, so we're gonna might even send second army. They have these two settlements. I think we're gonna make this the last Vampire Coast stream and play the dwarves next time. Well, I like starting to fall asleep with this campaign. At least the dwarf campaign is gonna be mildly interesting. This is just pretty much just click, 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 farm chaos, go for Tlaqua and get short campaign victory.
No prey, no pay. Serve for eternity. By your will.
Curse my crowded psyche. The dead do not tire.
Don't care about this area. The south.
March, you dead curs! Gunnery wide.
This income is okay to just keep building.
Salute your betters. Voyaging.
Epistel guides next.
Fleet captain reporting. Time to move.
I think we're just gonna end here. basically we have all the last we need, and there's just like 2 things to get, and it's with the victory screen. Except we're not going for the victory screen.
You are a problem.
So Tlauka seems to have a couple of settlements here, so we would have to go there to get the quest done. We do have to complete this quest for the victory. We're just missing the Southern Great Jungle, which is the settlement here. We have gonna get the rest from the allies once their ability recovers in about 8 turns. Clan Pestilence is getting destroyed. They have these 2 settlements. They have no military. Victory settlements will be from allies, and then we just recruit another 20 units, and this is the quest.
About time. They're sharp bait. Time for me.
I have no
Sea
equal.
knows my fate.
No equal. Probably going to wait for Friday to start the Dwarf campaign, guys. Though I don't wanna. I wanna at least have a couple of days this campaign before the risk of a patch kill the Spanish guy. So the Dwarf campaign will start on Friday.
Fly the flag.
Why am I clicking buttons here? This Dwarf campaign is might be a little bit challenging depending what happens. Without the extra chaos, it's not gonna be as unpredictable though. We don't have the extra chaos on, probably, so who knows what's gonna happen. So the next campaign will probably start on Friday. It's the Karazakarak first time since they renamed the faction name. Well, starting as the High King Torgrim the Grudge Bearer. There'll be no confederations with other dwarves, no lightning strike, so this is why the chaos could be interesting. We cannot get a white dwarf until either the High King or the capital Karazakarak have lost the battle. We could, do it on purpose, but looks like it's not there gonna be no white dwarf, so this we are starting with the High King. So no white dwarf campaign overpowerness. Each time a legendary lord loses a battle, trigger handicap. So if we only have the High King, so if the High King and/or if we have the white dwarf, they lose a battle, we have to trigger a handicap. Handicap is every army can only use the amount of units specified. There's no workarounds, so it's limit 5, so it can be triggered 5 times in the campaign. So our army size could drop to 15 if the legendary lords get defeated. Every time we lose a settlement defense, so if our settlements get attacked and we lose it, we have to give a faction 10,000 gold or anything under 10,000 gold. I picked which faction. If I disband the unit, I have to do treachery, so I have to break a treaty in diplomacy or declare war if I disband the unit, so we won't be able to disband units, it's gonna be super inconvenient. We are not allowed to do regular research. We can only queue one technology if settlement is captured. If we are already researching technology, we can't queue another, so we can only have one technology at a time. So we have to plan our research according to that, so it's severe handicap, but it was the final master campaigns of the last year. So we'll see how it goes. This is all on paper. In theory, it might, sound a little bit confusing, or you guys might think it's dwarves. It's gonna be easy time, but one thing goes wrong. And everything will explode. There's another thing that's not really there because it doesn't fit. We can only have iron breakers in the army if the army has 2 Thanes, and if any of the Taints die in that army, you have to disband all Army Breakers in that army. And only armies with a Master Engineer are allowed to have organ guns and the flank cannons. So there is more, but that doesn't fit. I think that's everything. So if you want to use Arm Breakers, you have to put 2 Taints in the army. So this is actually a big restriction. Taints are really hard to kill, but if they get killed, we have to disband all Arm Breakers. So either if they get assassinated by a hero or die in battle, we have to get rid of all Arm Breakers in that army. No exceptions. This will start on Friday, and hopefully make us make it interesting until the patch, which who knows when it is. We'll wait until Friday for this campaign, so there's still 2 more days before they can patch stuff. If you guys have any questions, ask now, cause I'm gonna go off in about 10 minutes. I'm gonna get a nap. We should actually make sure that the other rules fit there as well. I need to make sure it fits. I'm playing X3 Albion Prelude to pass the time until the patch, because this Saturday game is a little bit boring. Uh, 137 previous. This campaign is considered finished, boys. We reach critical mass and we quit on turn 137 on the way to short campaign victory. We need to fit the other things. I guess we can just say it White Dwarf. Okay, then move Mortal Empires, because it's obviously it's Mortal Empires with Karaz Karak. We don't have to put full name of the High King. Just put White Dwarf. That's just a wall of text. Guess we can make another command with the rest of it. We're gonna have to put 2 commands for how many rules are in this campaign. Wounded is allowed. we have a campaign. Next. Karzakarak, number 1 is hiking, no confederations, no lightning strike, white dwarves not allowed until either main army or Karzakarak have lost a battle. Each time Legend Lord loses a battle, trigger a handicap. Each time a settlement defense is lost, trigger a theft. Each time a unit gets banned, trigger a treachery. Regular research and knowledge is not allowed. One knowledge can be queued only if settlement is captured. Campaign plus for next. Campaign plus. Ironbreak is only allowed in the army if army has 2 taints. If at any time one of those two taints dies, we have to dismantle all Ironbreakers. If one of those 2 taints is wounded, it's allowed to keep. Organ guns and flame cannons only allowed in an army with master engineer. If the master engineer of the army is wounded, they're allowed as well. Okay. That's it, boys. That's gonna be the next campaign starting on Friday. Friday, which is in 3 days, but we're pretty much starting a late stream, so some of you are probably gonna miss the campaign. I'm gonna start it probably in the night hours. I'm gonna take a nap, and when I get back, I'll play some X3. I'll see you guys later.